Nick. Poor John nagged all day by Karen up to his death. The Democrats are fighting our government to protect foreign invaders. Can you explain what the founders or the law would call this behavior?
You're really on tenuous ground there. The founders had very different concept of immigration policy than we have, and they did for like very obvious reasons, right? They were all immigrants, and they were trying to build the country's numbers up. Like they wanted people here. They wanted, they needed to fill out military ranks because they're still fighting with England. They had, of course, expansion west coming, and they had frontiersmen who were dealing with natives, and so local militias became really important as well. And just having more people is helpful for all of those things. Plus, there's a ton of economic opportunity in the forms of gathering resources and then using those resources. So immigration was not in the same category as it is today. They also didn't have like Islamic terrorism and stuff like that in the same measure. That you would have had the the Barbary pirates is the first sort of idea that we get the United States having to deal with something like terrorism. But that happened on the waters. You didn't have the same thing. Nowadays, you get someone across the border, you give them a vest with an IED on it, and they can cause a hell of a lot of havoc. But they didn't deal with the same issues. So I don't think you're going to find a lot of agreement. Also, the fact that border control was something that really didn't exist in the modern capacity and modern understanding that we have today until about 1967 with the Immigration Naturalization Act, and then really ramped up in the 80s. Up until 1967 and 1985, we didn't have a modern border enforcement structure that we have today. We had cyclical immigration across the border and back. Please don't mistake this as me saying it's the same thing and we should go back to that. I do think it would be cool if we could go back to it, because it would mean a lot of really good changes had occurred that should occur, the undoing of a lot of policy, right? We didn't used to entice people across the border with social welfare packages that cost the citizenry a ton of money and encourage people with low economic status and low ability to change that economic status to come across the border and then be taken care of by taxpayers in the United States. We do that now. We didn't do that then. It was a wildly different world. They weren't getting a ton of social welfare programs. They weren't able to anchor themselves in the country and bring over a bunch of family members and stuff like that. So
Nick Law, there is no birthright citizenship. The 14th was for one purpose, and Democrats using it to replace American citizens. I love the founders.
The 14th Amendment was for Black people. There's no way around it. It's been used differently, but the 14th Amendment was basically to ensure the citizenship of emancipated slaves after the 13th Amendment, which says no more slaves, right? Like that's pretty obvious. If you take any honest reading of the 14th Amendment, it doesn't make sense in any other context. But the idea was that they were going to give citizenship to people who were here, and they were going to give citizenship to the offspring of people who were here that were brought here against their will. And the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments being passed within relatively at the same time. The 14th Amendment was clearly targeted towards Black people. They actually had cases about it. And early on, I believe the Supreme Court, there was one or two cases, I can't remember, maybe the slaughterhouse cases, where they did kind of adhere to that Black people only for the 13th, 14th, and 15th, but that, that got co-opted pretty quickly. Yeah, birthright citizenship is problematic in many ways. We have the philosophical conflict is that the Constitution applies wherever the United States has jurisdiction. The U.S. has jurisdiction over its own borders, and the 14th Amendment does say anyone born within the jurisdictional United States, I believe they say something like that, that involves citizenship. Hold on, let's find the text of the 14th Amendment. So again, 14th Amendment, Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Now, see, this is where, obviously, this is where we're getting this. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Okay, so here's where the language is conflicting, and here's where the argument should lie. If we go to the end here, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Okay, so this is the jurisdiction of the United States, of course, encompasses anyone within its own border. It also would be, on any U.S. military bases, which are United States soil. There are certain people who are under the jurisdiction of the United States, even when they're outside of the country. Any U.S. citizen is still under the jurisdiction of the United States. There are laws you can break while being outside of the United States, and they are punishable within the United States. One of them that I've talked about in the past year is, basically the child sex tourism laws. Even if a country has an age of consent that is, let's say it's 12 or something like that, you cannot, as a U.S. citizen, go to that country for the purposes of having sex with a 12-year-old. Can't do it. If you do, you will be charged with a felony and you will go to prison where hopefully you will be killed. So that being said, you're still under the jurisdiction of the United States so long as you're a United States citizen or a permanent resident who is granted the ability to be here. Because you've agreed, permanent residents, of course, have asked the United States to put them under its jurisdiction. But this is here's the real problem where birthright citizen, or they call it birthright citizenship, but it's like an anchor baby, right? All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Someone who is here illegally is within the jurisdiction of the United States, but they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States until they're acquired. Does that make sense? Or they're violating the law of the United States. The U.S. hasn't had the opportunity to extend jurisdiction over someone who is here illegally until they actually acquire them. I know that's a weird sort of way to look at this, because you go, well, if they're within the borders of the United States, they're under their jurisdiction. But how? How can you be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States if you're in here illegally and the U.S. hasn't actually gotten its greasy mitts on you? That's the whole point. Once the U.S. gets its greasy mitts on you, you are definitely subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So I do think there's a strong argument that if you are arrested and detained, for example, and then have a baby, that baby probably has a right to citizenship under the 14th Amendment. But this broad idea that someone can come here illegally, give birth, and then that they were subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, it isn't true. They haven't had the opportunity to extend jurisdiction over this person. But that's not how the courts read it. But this is very different. Like this language, and this is important. The Supreme Court itself says that every word, phrase, and lack of words or phrases is intentional. That the Constitution exists as a perfected document, and that there's nothing that can be read into. No words can be added or taken away from any sentence. So we have two differing concepts here about jurisdiction. We have subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and then within its jurisdiction. Those are two different things. Anyone within its jurisdiction cannot be denied equal protection. All right. So that's within the borders. But the difference in this language should be noted because it matters. It matters very much when there is a difference of phrase or expression in the Constitution. And one of them, again, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, means the jurisdiction has been exercised. The other one is merely that jurisdiction exists. And those are two different concepts. They're blended, though, in the Supreme Court's desire to create this false birthright citizenship shit. So if you want to know my opinion on it, that's it. That's the basic gist of my argument about it. You can go through a whole bunch of Supreme Court case law on it, but if you start with the assumption that the Supreme Court's conclusion is bullshit, let's go back to the text. It's pretty clear that there are two different statuses that happen there. One is within the jurisdictional bounds of the United States, and the other one is once jurisdiction is actually exercised over someone. If an illegal immigrant, I guess this is a way to think of it. If someone illegally crosses the border into the country and then illegally crosses the border back out of the country, the United States does not have any opportunity to grab them. Has the United States subjected them to jurisdiction in any way? Well, no. No, there's no enforcement of law. There are no permitting or licensing requirements. There's no registration requirements. That nothing that any other citizen or subject of the United States would go through has occurred to this thing. It's like a thief walking into and out of a house in the night. That thief does not become a family member. But when you capture that thief, tie them up and make them watch cartoons, they're now a sibling. I hope that helps.